Warning, this video contains disturbing graphic violence.
Welcome to Taylor. You shouldn't fight with the police, brother.
Taylor police have a well-documented history of brutalizing people. It has to end, which is why the ACLU of Michigan is asking the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate. In a complaint just filed with the DOJ, they identified 20 instances of alleged and documented acts of unconstitutional, extreme violence committed by Taylor police officers. What follows are just a few examples of the abuse they've inflicted. In case after case, Taylor officers have unleashed inexcusable violence against defenseless people. When Calvin Jones and his wife were pulled over in 2016, Mr. Jones merely wanted to know the reason for the stop before providing his ID and exiting the car.
You gotta let me know what's going on. Here's the deal. For all I know, you could be trying to kill me right now. You're absolutely ridiculous, all right? I don't care. All right, step out of the car. It's been 2 minutes. I'm not stepping out the car until you tell me what's going on. All right, open the door.
The officer could have immediately diffused the situation by telling Mr. Jones that he ran a stop sign. Instead, the officer called for backup, then took matters into his own hands.
You gotta let me know what's going on, man. You're not going. You're going to jail with what's going on. For what? You ain't. What charges?
When watching what happens next, keep in mind Mr. Jones remains fastened in his seatbelt. After being placed in what looks like a chokehold, Mr. Jones remains on the ground, not moving. When officers attempt to lift him, his body is limp and he appears to be unconscious. As for Mr. Jones' wife, who complies with police commands, they also cuff and arrest her. Mr. Jones later said that he was put in a cell, ordered to strip down to his underwear and lie face down on the floor. All charges against Mr. Jones and his wife were eventually dropped. In 2016, Taylor police followed Cody Meredith, a young black man, all the way into his mother's driveway, allegedly for failing to use a turn signal. When Mr. Meredith exits his vehicle and walks toward the house instead of getting back in the car as ordered, officers immediately respond with excessive force, tackling him to the ground, beating him, and stunning him with a taser. According to a lawsuit filed by Mr. Meredith, one of the officers, who has a history of abuse, continued to kick him after he was handcuffed and secured. After his arrest and release from jail, Mr. Meredith went to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with trauma, a concussion, injuries to his face, and multiple bruises to his body. Taylor police say Imani Rigo DeBell, a black man, was speeding when they pulled him over in 2019. His girlfriend and 3-year-old daughter were passengers. An Illinois resident visiting family in Michigan, Mr. Rigo DeBell, has been issued a driver's license, but did not have it on him, though he had a picture of it on his phone. The temporary tags for his newly purchased car had fallen off. With as many as a half-dozen patrol cars converging on the stop, Mr. Rigo DeBell was ordered to exit the vehicle. When he asked for an explanation, officers answered with violence while his child watched in horror. A law enforcement professional who reviewed footage of the encounter suggested that the abuse of Mr. Rigo DeBell was sparked by what's known as contempt of cop, simply questioning the order to exit his vehicle. In an attempt to stop Mr. Rigo DeBell from filing a potentially costly civil rights suit, the city resorted to blackmail. All charges against him would be dropped, but only if he signed a waiver giving up his right to sue. He refused the deal. Using this tactic to fend off civil suits can hide patterns of excessive force and communicates to officers that the city will attempt to cover up their abusive, unconstitutional behavior. Because the city doesn't track its use of waivers, it is not known how often victims of police violence are coerced into signing them. In April 2020, Taylor police answer a call alleging a domestic disturbance. Upon arrival, they see 33-year-old Brendan Morgan, a black man, driving away. When officers signal for him to stop, Mr. Morgan pulls into a gas station parking lot. With guns drawn, Officers swarm Mr. Morgan's car and viciously attack him while he has both hands raised. While multiple officers hold him face down on the ground, another officer tases Mr. Morgan. The horrific encounter ends with an officer taunting Mr. Morgan.
Welcome to Taylor. You shouldn't fight with the police, brother.
The officers then lie in their incident reports about what happened, falsely claiming Mr. Morgan tried to walk away from the vehicle after stopping, prompting officers to, quote, escort him to the ground. After seeing the video of what really happened, a judge dismissed all charges against Mr. Morgan, including resisting and obstructing a police officer and fleeing. One officer was charged with assaulting Mr. Morgan. Not all victims of police brutality in Taylor are black. Chris Saul, who is white, was 18 when police pulled him over for speeding. The officer remains parked behind Mr. Saul's vehicle on the shoulder of the road, then honks 6 times. Confused, Mr. Saul thinks the honking means he's free to leave. He carefully pulls out and drives slowly until the officer pulls him over again. That's when several patrol cars converge on him. Even though he follows commands and doesn't resist, police swarm and violently yank Mr. Saul from his Jeep. Mr. Saul was convicted of fleeing and eluding, a felony that has critically damaged his opportunities for education and employment. Taylor police don't treat everyone the same. Watch how they handle a white man toting an assault-style rifle and other weapons.
I'm going on my second open carry walk. I got my AR, my Ruger SR40C. Got my brother with me again. Today we're going to walk in Taylor. And Taylor's known for having one of the worst police departments in the Tri-County area.
First off, are they both operating actual firearms, or are they airsoft, anything like that?
I don't want to answer any questions other than what I told you so far. I do not have to prove anything to you, sir. It's my Second Amendment right, firearms, so I don't wish to provide that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to need you to provide the ID for you.
This isn't Nazi Germany, sir.
All right, you guys are all set, man. I'm asking you respectfully to please expedite your show of constitutional rights.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right.
Sadly, far too many people, especially black men, never see this kind of courtesy from Taylor police officers. Instead, they are beaten, tased, and arrested when they ask questions or don't respond quickly enough to officers' commands. The Department of Justice needs to investigate and bring an end to the unconstitutional abuse.